The Rams open what might be a painful season without Cooper Kupp. The Chargers hope to contain lightning. USC will enjoy a cupcake in the Pac-12, and UCLA unleashes its three-headed quarterback monster on an unsuspecting San Diego State. Hi, I'm James of Faithful Angelino Sports with the September 8th edition of Friday Night Chalk Talk, where we're going to break down the keys and the goals of each of LA's four major football teams during the regular season and, God willing, the playoffs. We're going to talk about both NFL teams and Pac-12 teams tonight. If you enjoy talking about the Rams, the Chargers, USC or UCLA, don't forget to subscribe to the channel because we talk about those teams every single day. But we can only go one team at a time. And yes, you might have noticed this is going to be a grand experiment where we may have to adjust things as we go along in order for you guys to see the plays. We'll start with the Rams. Now, my wife, God love her, was a little under the weather this week. They pumped her full of meds. And the reason I bring this up is because I think I may have ingested some of those meds. I think there's a pathway to victory this weekend for the Rams up in Seattle. Now, I damn sure wouldn't put money on it. I wouldn't. But, and I also am aware that they're out with Cooper Kupp. But the Rams lost both games to Seattle last season by a combined 7 points. 7 points. The second of those losses to Seattle came up north in overtime, when LA was playing a bunch of dudes who immediately after the game were going to suit up for the XFL. So basically what I'm trying to get at is the Rams' Sean McVay has some pretty clever ideas against Pete Carroll. Now, I know if you're a longtime USC fan, that sounds like heresy, but every coach has his nemesis. And by the way, Cooper Kupp wasn't in those games either against Seattle. For that matter, neither was Matthew Stafford. Neither was Aaron Donald. This, folks, is a trap game right out of the box for the Seahawks. I think Seattle needs to be on their toes. I really do. So tonight, what I want to do is focus on two plays that I believe the Rams will run consistently on Sunday. The first, over on the left side of the board, is a power gap play that McVay pretty much cribbed from the 49ers. The second is going to be a twist on the classic RPO, the run-pass option. The reason that these plays matter is because when the Rams are at their best on offense, they make every play look the same right at the snap. In other words, it may look like a power run. It may look like a jet sweep. It could just as easily be a bomb, a skinny post, something out in the flats. Now, when the Rams will have the ball, they're going to use their traditional 11 personnel, which means one running back, one tight end, against a 3-4 alignment for Seattle with a cover 3 defense. Seattle prefers playing 3 safeties deep as possible, as outlined over on this play over here, to basically prevent big plays. 2 corners. So Seattle goes nickel, maybe the corners will press up, not quite using a bump and run, more like trying to do something in run support and drop into a zone if it's not a run. This might play into McVay's hands in 2 ways. One, you get very little pressure on the quarterback. The Seahawks were middle of the pack at best in terms of sacks last year, with 45. And 2, because the Seahawks played the safety so back and didn't try to support the run in the 3-4, you could run on the Seahawks. They allowed the 3rd most rushing yards in the league. And LA can establish the run against the Hawks. They did so twice. They rushed for 146 yards in the season finale. Cam Akers rushed for over 100 in that game. And in the first game between the two teams, the Rams rushed for 171 yards. So if I'm the Rams, I'm trying to get the Seahawks to cheat, to bring linebackers up. Because I think Seattle's defensive line is the weakest unit on the team. I think Bobby Miller, the former Ram, the former Seahawk, now back with Seattle, I think he's going to have to be a one-man wrecking crew in order to secure a Seattle win. So let's go to both of the plays that I drew up on the dry erase board behind me. Over on the left, you will notice a gap power play. San Francisco likes to run that because it utilizes what the Rams do with their slot receiver. Now, I mentioned the Niners because the Rams' new offensive coordinator, Mike LaFleur, is formerly of San Francisco. Furthermore, the Rams bulked up on offensive line in the offseason. So I think that they're going to try to run a little bit more power this year. Now, typically in this 11 personnel formation, the slot receiver would be Cooper Kupp. And that would be ideal because Kupp could do everything. He could block. He was fearless in his run blocking. He could run this jet sweep. He could catch the pass. The problem the Rams are facing that they're hopeful isn't going to be as big of a deal is that leaves either Ben Skowronek or Tutu Atwell in the slot position. If it's Tutu Atwell, he's smaller than I am, for Pete's sakes. He's 5'9". Do you imagine him running around this corner and taking out Bobby Wagner or linebacker, 5'9"? I don't. And Ben Skowronek has an issue with pass drops. So sadly, the one thing that the Rams have going against them with this play is depending on who is lining up in the slot is a tell. It's an absolute tell. Now notice how this blocking scheme fits with a 3-4 defense, particularly if the nose tackle does not play immediately in front of the center. There's going to be a double team. That will take out the nose tackle, and that will enable this guard here to pull and also block off the linebacker. The idea with this opens up a seam for Cam Akers to run. Straight, right off tackle, power gap. Or they could theoretically adjust it, and if it's Tutu Atwell lining up in the slot, maybe not have Cam Akers run. You would have Tutu Atwell carrying the ball, Cam Akers sealing a block on the back. So that is one effective play that I believe the Rams are going to use. Slide RPO is something that you're also going to see as well. Now again, just like in the power gap play, it's using the same personnel, 11, one running back, one tight end. And again, you're probably going to have somebody, probably a slot receiver, going in motion to make the play look like it could be power gap on the other side. The pre-snap read from the quarterback, if it is to pass, the intended receiver in the slide RPO is literally going to slide behind the offensive line and get open out in the slot. I will grant you that what I'm about to give you is a college stat, but it was completed 90% of the time because it is the easiest throw for any quarterback to complete. It's literally just dumping it off. It was completed 90% of the time in college, and it averaged over 8 yards per completion. What makes the play even better for the Rams is anyone can slide. In this particular drawing right here, I have the slot receiver sliding. It doesn't have to be. You could have the tight end take one step back, slide the opposite direction. One thing USC likes to do is they'll have their quarterback bootleg, Caleb Williams, obviously, and the running back will just duck in under here going to the same spot. Cheap completion, easy yards. The reason also that play is going to be easy to complete is, once again, Seattle has 3 safeties playing super far back off the line of scrimmage to prevent the big play. This is all designed to eventually get Seattle to break out of its defense. Now, I'll be honest with you, I still believe the Seahawks have more paths to victory. I don't deny that. They too can run. They let Rashad Penny go, but backup Kenneth Walker III rushed for more than 1,000 yards. And then Seattle added Zach Charbonnet, the running back out of UCLA. I like that pick. I think the Bruins, they used him to not only rush but catch passes. I think Charbonnet is ideal on third down. But in order for Seattle to win, you are asking me to believe that Geno Smith can have more than one good year. He has not proven that yet. I look at the Seattle offense and their offseason. I think they look at the draft. They realized they couldn't find a franchise quarterback, and then they decided to just simply idiot-proof the rest of the offense for Geno Smith. Those receivers, I admit absolutely that I admit that the receivers could go nuts. I do. Because the Rams have a frighteningly young defensive backfield. But the Rams, without Aaron Donald, sacked Geno Smith 7 times. Now the Rams do, in fact, have Aaron Donald. So this game has trap game written all over it. Now, I believe not having Kupp will probably be a difference, and Seattle will sneak by. But this is not going to be the ass kicking that many analysts are trying to give you. Let's move on to the Chargers. If you've watched this channel for any length of time, you would know I'm on the road a lot, dropping clips from garbage hotels with drug deals going on in the hallways. And I bring that up because plane rides are a disorienting pain in the rear. They always are. Now, I will also grant you there's a difference between a chartered flight on a fancy jet as opposed to going to the Frontier counter at LAX, but any cross-country flight will discombobulate you. And it is very common in the NFL when a Cali team flies to the East Coast, and in this case, when Miami flies out west. You look sluggish for a half. I really believe that plus a critical Dolphins injury will mean the Bolts win a shootout on Sunday. I'm very confident about the Chargers' chances. Now, there's no question in my mind, Miami is one of the league's fastest teams. Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, they both clocked in at faster than 21 miles per hour. Both also combined for more than 3,000 receiving yards. Raheem Mostert, one of the league's fastest running backs, all of whom boosted quarterback Tui Tagovailoa to a career year last season. That was when he was healthy. He throws for 25 touchdowns and just 8 picks. But the Chargers met Miami last year at SoFi Stadium, and the Chargers absolutely confounded the Dolphins. Tagovailoa completed only 10 of 28 passes. How did that happen? Well, the Bolts only sacked him twice. So what does that tell you? What that tells me is that the Chargers said, you know what? We're going to make sure that we don't get beaten by your speedsters, and we're going to play back, just like Seattle will against the Rams. The question is whether or not Dolphins coach Mike McDaniel can be patient. The Chargers could even go more passive than before. Last year's Chargers team ran a 4-3 defense. This time they're running the 3-4. That's potentially another person to drop into coverage, although I don't think they're going to do that. The Bolts had trouble stopping the run last year. You know, in that game, Miami averaged 4.8 yards per run? 4.8. McDaniel did not recognize that. He decided on his own to force the issue, to continue to go for big plays, and that bit him in the rear. The quarterback simply couldn't find open receivers in a powder blue defensive forest. Straight and simple. If McDaniel is impatient again, then all the Chargers have to worry about is one matchup. The Chargers' Asante Samuel versus Tyreek Hill. And by the way, Samuel will not be alone. I believe Derwin James will be helping him out. Those 2-on-1s, even with someone like Tyreek Hill, I don't know how many times Miami's going to gamble on that. Now, I mentioned injuries a moment ago. The Chargers are actually pretty doggone healthy for once. Miami, on the other hand, will not have Jalen Ramsey on the defensive backfield, and that is a killer for a number of reasons. For instance, it is true that Miami's Xavier Howard is a 4-time Pro Bowler. Totally true. But he might be starting to slow down because he is in his 30s, and he only intercepted 1 pass last year. Is he a shell of his former self? Moreover, you have a safety in Brandon Jones who missed 11 games last year with a knee injury. Do you really expect that those guys will be consistently able to cover Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Joshua Palmer, Quentin Johnston in his debut? I don't. See, the Dolphins tried to build their team much like the Rams did when the Rams were going to Super Bowls. They sent a ton of draft picks away. The Dolphins only had 4 draft picks in the last 2 drafts each. They invested those assets instead in order to land Tyreek Hill, Jalen Ramsey, linebacker Bradley Chubb. But the problem with going over the top for such high-end talent is you better keep them healthy or it's going to suck. It just is. The Rams team that won the Super Bowl was lucky to stay healthy. They were. The Dolphins are without Ramsey, and they're hoping Tagovailoa doesn't get another concussion. So I think Miami's defense is vulnerable, and I think that's going to enable Justin Herbert to have a bigger day than Tagovailoa. And that'll mean the Chargers are 1-0. I've said it twice so far. There's no reason to change now. The 6th-ranked Trojans are going to win when they host Stanford on Saturday. Now, this is not the Jim Harbaugh-era team that shocked Pete Carroll. It isn't even the intelligent smash-mouth teams that characterized David Shaw's tenure as coach. This is not going to be 3 yards and a pool of blood. The Cardinals are going for a change in culture with football. They want to play up-tempo. Their new coach, Troy Taylor, comes from nearby Sacramento State. You heard me right, Sacramento State. And he's taking over a 3-9 team. Now, to change an entire culture does not happen overnight. Taylor started 2-9 at Sacramento State, for example. He brought in recruits he could trust. Eventually, he built a program that could average more than 35 and eventually more than 42 points a game. They were pretty even in rushing and passing yards too, but he had to get his type of guys. He does not have that now. There are jobs to be won at Stanford. Stanford only returns 2 offensive starters. Sophomore Ashton Daniels won a 3-man competition at quarterback to replace Tanner McKee, who was drafted by Philly. They literally only have 2 things offensively going for them right now. Taylor's leading receiver last 2 years was the tight end when he was coaching in Sacramento. Stanford has a good tight end in Benjamin Urasek. Number 2 in catches, he was a second all Pac-12 selection. The other might be Alex Grinch, the USC defensive coordinator, taking way too many gambles. But will that be enough for Stanford to win? Absolutely not. No way. Look, Harbaugh didn't get the Cardinal to a bowl game for until his 3rd year. What I think is going to happen Saturday up at Palo Alto, it's at the Coliseum. What I think is going to happen at the Coliseum is Stanford will outsmart itself. They're going to try to play fast with inexperienced offensive players, and that suggests mistakes on top of mistakes, which suggests 3-and-outs. There are computer models that suggest that Stanford's defense is going to allow 460 yards per game. And those would include games without Caleb Williams. Now you're talking one with Caleb Williams. USC is going to smoke Stanford. Now, UCLA might be the most interesting game of the bunch. It might not be the shootout and thrills with the Chargers. It may not be the gut check for the Rams. But UCLA still hasn't answered questions. And for that matter, neither is San Diego State. Now, the Aztecs are 2-0. But last year, they tried in vain to open up the offense last year. And it almost cost them. The Aztecs are best when they are very responsible. Run the football, play solid if it's not spectacular defense. They tried to incorporate the forward pass, and thus far in the last year or so, they have failed. San Diego cannot afford to make mistakes. They don't have the athleticism of UCLA. For them to win, UCLA has to make a lot of mistakes. A lot. And by the way, UCLA is putting itself in position to make some mistakes. If you have 3 quarterbacks, you have none. There's a reason that's an old saying. The reason is that because nobody knows who the lead chef is in the kitchen, for a lack of a better way of saying it. The question for UCLA is how many mistakes are tolerable? This year, San Diego, what I can tell you is they lack a trustworthy front either on the offensive or defensive lines. They do like their backfield. Either way, I think this is the Bruins handily. Because again, the Bruins would have to make a ton of mistakes to lose. Chip Kelly, in my opinion, may be making a mistake by playing 3 quarterbacks, whether it's Colin Schlee, Dante Moore, Ethan Garbers. But just because I think he's making a mistake, it doesn't mean Chip Kelly is an idiot. He's going to know that if San Diego even tries to make it a game, that he's going to go back to his running game against San Diego State's weaker defensive line and just move the chains, run out the clock, take the W, and everybody goes on with their lives. So, in sum, I am very confident that USC, UCLA, and the Chargers will win. I think the Rams are facing the Seattle Seahawks at the right time, but I don't have enough data to predict a Rams victory. Now, if you enjoyed talking football with me tonight, don't forget to subscribe to Faithful Angelino Sports. We talk about these teams damn near every day. Thank you for watching. I'm James. We'll be back tomorrow. Faithful Angelinos is a Keon Corte El Queso production. Take care.